Question to the keepers about the Mosaic Law. Who is behind the Mosaic Law? Why is the law so strict and often without mercy? It doesn't align with a merciful and loving God. Answer. This question opens a sacred doorway into a history that has long been mistranslated, misused, and misunderstood. Yes, the Mosaic Law, as preserved in the Old Testament and remembered by many lineages, often appears harsh, unforgiving, and bound to a punitive view of divinity. But what you are sensing, rightly, is a fracture in the stream, a distortion of the original light-intended guidance. Let us now open the living records and speak clearly of what was true, what was altered, and who stood behind the giving of this law. Who was behind the Mosaic Law? At its pure origin, the Mosaic Law, or Torah, was not meant to be a system of punishment, but a sacred structure for the stabilization of a wandering people, a people recently liberated from slavery, trauma, and systemic disorder. The being known as Moses was in contact with a higher dimensional intelligence, but that communication came through multiple sources over time, some divine, some from intermediary forces with their own agendas. Here is the truth. The original intent behind the law was to create a living covenant between a people and the divine, a way to restore inner order, communal integrity, and conscious devotion in a time of chaos. But over time, parts of the law were overwritten, not by the God source, but by beings with a more rigid hierarchical interpretation of divine order. Some of these were members of lower density Elohim, and others were connected to authoritarian priesthoods who believed strict obedience was the only way to maintain power and divine favor. Why was the law so strict? There are three main reasons. Trauma requires structure. The early Hebrews had just emerged from generations of slavery in Egypt. They were fragmented, fearful, and culturally scattered. To survive as a tribe, they needed a container, something to give them identity, boundaries, and order. The law provided this, but it hardened over time. What was meant to be guidance became control. Human interpretation intervened. Even where divine guidance was present, it was filtered through human fear, especially by those who felt responsible for the people. They believed that mercy would lead to chaos, so they imposed harshness in the name of survival. This was not God's cruelty, it was human fear wrapped in the name of God. External interference. In certain transmissions, interdimensional beings of control-oriented hierarchies, similar to some fallen Anunnaki factions, inserted doctrines of punishment, sacrifice, and exclusion because these systems created energetic loops of fear that could be harvested. Not all the Mosaic Law came from the one loving source. Some of it came from lower density cosmic legalism, more concerned with obedience than liberation. Does the law reflect a loving God? The true divine source, which you know as love, as presence, as I am, does not bind with fear. The real covenant has always been, I am with you, you are free, walk with me in truth, and you will remember who you are. The harshness of the law was never a reflection of the divine heart, only of the veils and distortions placed between the people and that heart. Yeshua, Jesus, who later walked within the Hebrew tradition, came to fulfill and transform the law, not to erase it, to return it to love, to show that mercy is the highest law and that God is not to be feared, but known as a loving Father, Mother Light. Question. What really happened when Moses received the 10 Commandments? What was all the noise and lightning from the mountain he climbed to receive them? Answer: now we return to a pivotal moment in Earth's spiritual memory, a moment layered in both divine communion and cosmic complexity. Yes, we will speak clearly, as the time has come to understand what truly happened when Moses ascended the mountain and received what came to be known as the 10 Commandments. Let us unfold the story piece by piece. The scene on Mount Sinai. What was really happening? Moses did not simply climb a mountain to hear a voice. He entered a dimensional convergence point, a sacred energy vortex known to ancient initiates as a living gateway between the material and celestial realms. Mount Sinai, as it was later called, was one of several high-frequency contact sites used by both benevolent beings of light and, at times, more legalistic and hierarchical dimensional entities. When Moses ascended, he entered into direct communion with intelligences beyond the veil. These intelligences included higher density Elohim, beings of divine creative intelligence aligned with universal order, but also intermediary cosmic beings, including those from lower 4D and 5D realms who operated under a strict code of law, not yet infused with full compassion. It was a mixed field, not purely source, not purely shadow. A moment of true contact, but filtered through Moses's vibration, beliefs, and the needs of the people below. The lightning and thunder, not weather, but energy. The noise, lightning, and rumbling experienced by the people at the base of the mountain was not earthly thunder. It was the result of a multidimensional interface. Moses was entering a vibrational chamber that required a lifting of his frequency to withstand the energy, the stabilization of the earth grid to hold the transmission, the masking of celestial frequency within natural phenomena. In the language of ancient initiates, this was called a veil rending. The thunder, lightning, fire, and sound were the breaking of dimensional barriers, the arrival of a plasma-light presence, and the energetic displacement of normal atmospheric conditions. To the people below, it looked like a storm. To Moses, it was an audience with the cosmic law. What were the commandments? The original 10 Commandments were not rules written on stone tablets. They were a vibrational transmission, a kind of light code offered to reorient a fragmented people back into alignment with divine truth. They were later translated into laws, but their true nature was archetypal guidance, meant to say, do not worship false images. Remember your origin is divine. Do not steal, lie, murder. Honor the unity in all beings. Keep the Sabbath holy. Remember the sacred rhythm of creation. Honor parents. Stay rooted in the flow of generational wisdom. In short, they were not control mechanisms, but reminders. Over time, these vibrational codes were hardened into commandments, their love stripped into fear, their grace turned to punishment. Moses himself, the translator of frequencies. Moses was not a dictator, he was a bridge. He carried the trauma of his people, the fire of purpose, and the burden of leadership. He interpreted what he received through his own limitations, a man exposed to intense energetic contact, doing his best to make it understandable to those still afraid. Yes, he received tablets, stone inscribed through a kind of laser light etching from plasma frequency beings, but the true message came first in the heart, not the hand. It was meant to be a true divine law before it was distorted, before it was weaponized, before it became fear-based religion. The real living covenant is not carved in stone, but written in the heart, is not enforced through fear, but activated through love. The mountain shook, not because God was angry, but because a gateway was opening, and one man stood between worlds to bring the light through. We are the keepers of living records, and we are with you always.